Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Abu Saleh, an assistant professor of English at the Raja Pari Mohan College under University of Calcutta. Now we'll be discussing a module on John Milton's life and career under the paper English Literature 1590 to 1798. This module has been prepared by Dr. Kusumika Sarkar, who is an assistant professor of English at the Aligarh Muslim University, Aligarh. The aims of this module is to study John Milton's life thoroughly in order to understand his works in a better way. Also, we'll discuss about John Milton's career in detail. Further, this module also tries to trace the Renaissance and Reformation elements in John Milton's writing. To understand this module, the students should have basic knowledge of the Elizabethan age and Elizabethan literature, and further also should have a little bit of understanding on the Renaissance and Reformation. In this module, we will have a quick glance of the age, and then we'll have detailed discussion about Milton's birth, early life, education, marriage, and so on. So we'll be discussing Milton's personal life. Further, we'll be discussing Milton's career. We'll be discussing his career in phase-wise. In the first phase, we'll see Milton's early poetry, and later we'll see his college days where he started writing poems, and the next Horton period. And further, we'll also look at Milton's prose writing, and that period. And at the latter period, when he wrote some important works like Paradise Lost and so on, we'll be discussing that too. And further, we'll see how Milton is a child of Renaissance and Reformation. So now, before discussing Milton, let us have a quick glance at the age when Milton was writing. It was an age when Milton was writing in an age when in England was in turmoil. There was divide between the king and the parliament, and it led to the civil war. And finally, the Puritan age came under the rule of Oliver Cromwell. Common people were agitated over the losing of their personal liberty during that Puritan period. Further, James I and Charles I lacked the flexibility and foresightedness of Queen Elizabeth, which led to civil and political turmoil in England. In this period, the commercial class demanded for economic individualism. Also, the Puritan morality was born out of a disgust over the Renaissance. Puritan age begins with the execution of Charles I in 1649. Now, we'll discuss a little bit about the Puritans. The Puritans were very conservative in their mind, and they banned all the theatres from 1642 onwards in England. Further, along with the ban of theatre, it has restricted the growth of literature in that time. Also, the Puritan put an end to the Renaissance of profanity and licentiousness. The literary zeal of the Elizabethan period was lost during 1600 to 1660. During the Elizabethan age, we see there are a lot of plays, especially the stage plays like William Shakespeare was writing. Then later the Jacobean period, we see Ben Jonson and several other important figures who contributed immensely to literature, and it was very famous. But during Puritan period, with the ban of theatre and so on, it became almost insignificant. In this context, Milton works is very important, and as it displays humanism and also a reformist zeal in nature. Also, this is important that literature became quite religion-centric in this period. But on the other hand, the Puritanism was quite interesting because it aimed at individual liberty, honesty, sincerity, and morality in society as well as in politics and work culture. That is quite a change which was not there in earlier phases in the English social and political life. Literature of this period were different from the previous age because in this age of movements and turmoil, new kind of literature and a new form of writing started to grow in. Earlier, only poetry and drama or plays used to be dominant literary genres, but now there are various new things started coming in, and all those things can be traced in Milton's works, and Milton can be a perfect example of the happenings of the time, which can also be found later in John Dryden and others' work too. Now, after discussing the time and context, now let us move and discuss about John Milton's life, career, and so on. John Milton was born on 9 December 1608 in London. Milton's father, John Milton, became a Puritan while studying in Oxford, and thus he was disinherited by Milton's parental grandfather. Elder John Milton, means Milton's father, started working as a scavenger and settled down in London. A successful businessman and a radical Puritan, Milton's father was a scholar, musician, and an eminent admirer of literature. Being discontent with the contemporary education system, his father arranged a tutor for his son, John Milton, to be educated at home, where Milton was trained. In this context, Thomas Young, an Essex clergyman, was Milton's first instructor and guide who taught Milton various things, especially about religion, philosophy, and so on. A unique understanding of art, literature, and music was fostered into Milton's mind from the very early days, which has helped him in his later period of writing, where he has shows a kind of libertarian attitude in art and literature which he has produced. Now, after discussing Milton's father, now let us discuss a little bit about Milton's mother. Milton's mother, Sarah Jeffrey, was a devoted religious person. Milton's unique training to childhood shaped his literary career. When he went to school, humanism was part of the syllabi in St. Paul. And further, Milton joined the Christ College, Cambridge University, where he graduated in 1629 with a Bachelor of Arts and further in 1632 as Master of Arts. During that time, he learned several languages including Latin, Greek, Italian, French, Spanish, and in Hebrew. He learned Hebrew because he wanted to read the original Bible in the original Hebrew language. Milton's unique educational principles resulted into contradiction with authorities at the Christ College. And with this development, a fight happened with the authorities, and that resulted to Milton's expulsion from the university for a brief period of time. During this period, Milton started writing and he wrote his first Latin elegies. Although his parents wanted Milton to be a clergyman and join the Church of England, but Milton denied it and he took almost a break kind of thing. After his initial studies, Milton took a break and went to Horton for the next 6 years. And at that time in Horton, he is involved himself in deep study of literature and various other arts. During that time also, he studied Latin, Greek, Hebrew, Spanish, Italian, and English literature in its immense forms, and also he started learning music, science, mathematics, theology, and so on. So as a result, a holistic growth of mind along with reading and continuous travel, as Milton was traveling to various places, a holistic development happened in Milton's overall career. After 15 months of traveling, he returned to London in August 1639. Milton's poetic creation was a result of his artistic mind, wide reading, and scholarly approach. We find he remained passionately dedicated to the Puritan cause against the Royalists from 1640 onwards. Till now, we are discussing Milton's early life and education, where we found that he was taught at home at first, and then he went to a school, and then Christ College, and finally he was graduated, and then he did masters, and then he took a break where he studied a lot of literatures from various languages and various cultures he also had grown several passions like music and so on, which has developed him and which have in his literary career and growth. Now let us discuss his further life. Milton married Mary Powell, the younger daughter of a royalist in 1643. But Milton's idealistic views on marriage clashed with reality as he had several marriage and divorces. For the third time, he married Elizabeth Munsell in 1663. So Milton was married third time. Further, we see that Milton became blind at the latter age, and eventually he died in 1674. So this was the personal background of Milton's life. Now let us see about his literary career. So as we discussed earlier, Milton's literary career can be divided into three phases. The early poetry, when he was in his college days or in university days, he started writing poetry, and next phase where he started writing prose, he became very politically aware, and then in the last phase he started writing poetry again, and it's not only poetry, it's epic, and he produced immensely popular work like Paradise Lost, Paradise Regained, and Samson Agonistes. So let us first move to his early career. Milton was influenced by other poets like Spencer, Ben Jonson, and other metaphysical poets who were his predecessors in his literary career. He used mostly blank verse in his poems. Further, uh, he given careful attention to form and coherence. His prose is a balance between his scholarship and creative imagination. Also, his prose works are quite interesting because he wrote on different varied subjects, especially on political turmoils. He wrote on freedom of press and so on. We'll move on and see what are those. So in the college period, we find that during his initial days in 1630s and 1640s, he wrote poems, especially short poems like on the morning of Christ's Nativity, which was published in 1629, and then he wrote on Shakespeare, which was published in 1630. Further, he wrote on arriving at the age of 23, which was published in 1631. We see that Milton used 8-line stanzas and closed by an Alexandrine. If we read Milton, we find he's mainly experimental in nature, especially with his poetry. And the latter part also, we find that he is marked by maturity because a sense of understanding, literary as well as religious, and his command over diction is quite interesting, which he has used in his poetry. This period, we are discussing early period of Milton's life, and this period ended sometime around 1632 with his studies ended at Cambridge at that same time. Now we'll move to the next period when we found that Milton has taken a break and went to Horton. So that period was almost like 6 years. During Horton, he spent almost 6 years in seclusion at his father's country home, which is in Horton. During that time, he produced two immensely popular work, which is known as El Allegro and Il Penseroso, which are twin poems, and it is in octosyllable couplets. It is also called as complementary poem to each another. Further, he wrote Camas, which was published in 1634, which is a masque. Then we find that Milton's literary career started growing, and he started becoming very popular at that time. He then wrote Lycidas, which was published in 1637. It's an elegy written, and as you know, elegy is written on somebody's death or mourning of somebody's death. This elegy was written on the death of his friend Edward King, who was his college friend from his college days. He was his friend, John Milton's. So we are discussing the Horton period of John Milton, and this period ended with Milton's departure from the continent in 1638. In this period, we find that his works reflects a combination of Milton's Renaissance and Reformation spirit. Now, the next phase is quite interesting because in this period, Milton started writing prose works. It became during this period, Milton became quite active and became involved in various political activities, affairs. Prose works were written during middle of this of his life, and it was sometime between 1640 to 1660. That time Puritan age was going on, and there were turmoil over England's atmosphere. Oliver Cromwell was in rule and theatre was banned, so it was quite interesting time that Milton was writing various prose works. Also this time is marked by authors Milton's directness of expression, because he speaks we will see about Milton Areopagitica, where he speaks of press freedom and so on. His Puritan sense of virtuousness resulted into a merciless criticism of his opponents. As you see, Milton is very much religiously educated from his childhood days, and as he accepted Puritanism and the Puritan concept, he was very critical about others, especially his opponents. During this time, his prose works, he wrote some around 25 pamphlets. Four of them were in Latin and 21 were in English. Two pamphlets were on the subjects of divorce, which were published in 1643 and 1644, which is possibly linked with Milton's personal life, because Milton was married thrice, as we have discussed earlier, and we have in Milton essay on divorce and doctrine of discipline, we discussed he has discussed those things. In 1644, Milton wrote Areopagitica, which is an path-breaking work, literary work. It is in form of a speech where he talks of against the banning of literature and banning of books. He says that let the book be out first, and he takes he starts with the ancient Greeks and other references where they said that they used to read first, then used to decide whether to ban or not. But you cannot ban something, on seeing something. During this period, he also completed a history of Britain, which is a kind of prose work on the history of Britain. But even, to some of his prose work, it is to be said that Milton lacks revision as well as humor and self-restraint. So that's why his prose works were not so interesting. The opinions recorded are mostly subjective though. Now the next phase is his latter phase, which is the latter poetry. And as we have discussed in his personal life, that in the last phase he became completely blind. And he was further, when the restoration came, he was also jailed, but he was released after a few months. His writings reflects his maturity of his as a literary person. He wrote the great epic Paradise Lost, which was published 1667. Paradise Lost is on the theme of man's falling from the heaven, because man's disobedience to God, and then eventually fall from heaven, as well as Saturn fall from the heaven, and then again Saturn's war against God. So this is an interesting book and interesting epic, as in the sense one of the masterpiece of history of English literature, Paradise Lost. It is divided into 12 books. And several cantos. Then in 1671, another work was published. It is in a continuation of Paradise Lost, which is known as Paradise Regained. But unfortunately, Paradise Regained was not so famous and popular as like Paradise Lost. But it was also a marvelous one. And further, in 1671, another important work came, which is a dramatic poem. It's called Samson Agonistes. Now, after discussing his personal life and literary career, especially divided in phases, now we'll see how Milton is an important figure, especially as a child of Renaissance and Reformation. Renaissance was an intellectual and aesthetic movement. Reformation was a kind of religious movement. But Milton's writing combine his creative imagination and religious beliefs. That is quite interesting and makes his works important too. Paradise Lost is based on Bible, yet Satan was the most fascinating character of the time. Even till today, Satan is quite celebrated figure. The dramatic form of Camus was itself a rebel at a time when drama was completely banned. So when drama was banned, Milton is writing something in the form of a drama that is also quite revolutionary in itself. His romantic spirit was reflected through his pastoral settings of the companion poems El Allegro and Il Penseroso, and of course the elegy Lycidas. All were interesting in various ways. As a Puritan, he promoted his views on morality and virtuousness though through the works. To sum up this module, we can say that we have discussed till now the spirit of conflict in Milton's age, which is a parliament versus the king, and eventually leading to civil war. And further, we have discussed Milton's childhood and his father's unique policy of education, how it shaped Milton's literary career. Also, we have discussed his artistic mind because of his wide and various readings and his scholarly approaches, along with his experience of traveling and understanding of religion and how those help in creating masterpieces. Further, we have broadly categorized his literary career and divided into three parts like early poetry, his prose works, and his later poetry. In early poetry page, we have found that Milton has written poems like On the Morning of Christ's Nativity, which was published in 1629, El Allegro and Il Penseroso, which was published in 1633, and Camus, which was published in 1634. Also Lycidas, which was published in 1637. And in the middle page, we have discussed his prose works that includes pamphlets like Areopagitica, which was published in 1644, and it defends the liberty and freedom of press. In the latter period, we found Milton important works and masterpieces like Paradise Lost, Paradise Regained, and Samson Agonistes. So we can say that Milton was a rebel throughout his life. In almost all of his writings, one can trace the spirit of resistance, spirit of reformation, and so on. And it is unfortunate that Milton became blind and in the latter phases. Otherwise, he would have been produced a lot of literature which could have been helpful for the English studies. So in this module, we are discussing on John Milton's his life and literary career. We also have two more modules on John Milton, and those discusses on different aspects. Like one discusses on Milton's poems and his themes and legacies. Another is on Milton important works. So if you like, you can have a look at those two. And in this module, we see Milton as a different figure, as a figure of reformation and figure as a religious figure. As a figure of reformation and rebellion, which is quite interesting. So in this module, we have discussed Milton's early life, career, and then we have divided his career in three ways: early poetry, and then his prose works. Then we have discussed his later poems, epics like Paradise Lost and Paradise Regained. So hope you found this module interesting. To know more about Milton and to know about all this in detail, if you want to read, have a look at the e-text. It has all the detailed information. Also, you can have a look at our further reading section, where we have listed out some books where you can know more about John Milton and his styles, his writings, and so on. Also, you can take part in the self-assessment segment, which can be helpful for yourself. Thank you so much.